Good evening, Hopkinton, and welcome to the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. I'm your host, Mike Terosia. Tonight, it is Wednesday, December 23. Oh, my goodness. The big guy's almost ready to get here. It's, speaking of big guy, I got the guy that's almost as big as the big guy, Tim Kilduff. Tim, how are you?
I'm pretty well now that I'm talking to you, pal. I got to tell you before we start, and we can go in any direction you like, but I'm pretty impressed with what HCAM has done the last 9 months. Really before that, but in particular, the last 9 months, creating the Hangout Hour and the other programming that you guys are doing, and keeping up with selectmen's meeting and planning board meetings. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, we try hard. We try very hard, and it all starts at the top. And speaking about starting at the top is my co-host and boss, Jim Cousins. Hi, Jim.
Hi. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for the kind words, Tim. We've heard that, and it's so important to us because community is our middle name. And when we had to close the studio for the pandemic, we had to decide how to make a TV show without a TV studio. And what we lose in quality, we gain in the ability to connect people from everywhere. And that has been tremendously exciting. And I'm really, really glad to hear you say that, because those comments are so important to us. It makes our day.
Well, it seems that it broadens your reach, but it's going to put some more demands going into the future. Now that you have this capability, we, the community, is going to demand more of that, I guess.
And you know what? We're working on that, because as I had said in staff meetings, when we get back to real life, and hopefully, man, it is on the horizon, this component will never go away. There will be a place for this type of programming on our channel. So what we're really working with now is, what are the things that we can do to make this the best possible quality that we can do? My video tonight is not an example of that. I'm just putting together a new studio space, and I'm still working on it. But, we're looking at what kind of cameras can we get, what kind of microphones can we have to really help the people who are being on our shows look and sound the best.
Oh, that's really great. Do you mind, Mike, if we talk a little bit about, Jim brought the word in community.
Yes.
But, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately are Hopkins community organizations, civic organizations. And I'm not referencing the elected and appointed boards. We know they've continued their work, and we're happy to have them continue to do that. But I'm talking about the kind of civic organizations that the three of us have run into, and how important they are to the community. And I think there are many times we take them for granted.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I was going to
Mike.
say that 100% agree with you on that. They are taken for granted. You don't realize how much gets done until something is not done. It's because, all right, here we go. Meet the candidates night.
Yeah.
Oh, God, couldn't do it. All these little things. And it's a big year, too, for the Women's Club. This is their 100th anniversary. 120th. No, 100, right?
100th, I think.
1920, great. So all these things that they couldn't do. So what do? They reinvent themselves. And that's what is great about these community organizations that you're mentioning, because they didn't just say, oh, COVID, all right, we're shut down, we'll just not do it. They came up with new ways, just like we had to come up with new ways to work here.
And go ahead. What I think, just real quickly, is that I have always said to so many people on these shows, from all aspects of the community, the business community, the community organizations community, the town side, is that what these people do are what make Hopkinton a great place to live. Hopkinton is so blessed. We have a world-class marathon that starts right at our common. It's so cool. And we have the #1 school district in Massachusetts. And we have so many people who volunteer and donate and help out so much that it's really a wonderful feeling in this community.
Well, one of the more recent ones that I noticed recently was from the state level, the local garden club was recognized.
Mm.
I think there's an example. These are people that are out there continuing to beautify, in large part, the downtown area, but we don't even know who they are.
Yeah, you don't see them until someday on a Saturday or Sunday. You see them in the islands, at the traffic lights.
Yeah,
you see them at the beautiful water trough there at CVS.
Yeah,
and just all those planters down on Main Street. And they're up at 5, 6 in the morning with their trailer full of water, watering all those, during the summertime to keep it going. And they're constantly doing it. And they do so much in our gorgeous gazebo, dressed up for the holidays. They just do so much. And again, you're not hearing anything about it because everyone's all, glued to computers.
Right. And and the Women's Club celebrating 100 years, 1920 is when they started, and they have records of that, of what life was like then. Chuck Joseph has gone through the historical archives, and he has seen before America existed. There are records of the town sending troops to the American Revolution.
Right.
It's just,
right.
Wow.
Because one of the best parts of that I didn't realize was the town common, which was bigger than what it is now,
right,
was actually a muster field. Who knew that?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot more for us to do, isn't there, in terms of capturing that. Couple of the other ones that I think go unnoticed. And Mike, I know you have a good working relationship and have been for years with the Boosters Club. There's another one.
Oh my goodness! And you saw it this year here. We're fortunate enough to have high school sports take place, and yet they needed more support this year because they had to do things with less. And the boosters were right there with them. Of course, they're not getting the draws into the store every day because of the COVID, so they're not really taking in the money, but yet they're still able. People are still contributing and supporting. And the boosters, and again, nobody sees it. And one of the prime examples of it was after games. After games at David Hughes Stadium, the boosters, they just form a line and they go down and they pick up every bit of trash.
Yeah.
It's them. It's not the custodial staff. It's not teachers. This is what the boosters do. They say, well, we're selling the hot dogs and the popcorn. We might as well pick up the, and they do. They do countless. They're great. Okay.
So Tim, this is not going to work. Okay. You're not going to distract us. We're here to talk about you. What I would like to start with, okay, is can you talk about your history in coming to Hopkinton and the groups that you have worked with? And then I'd like to branch off into the other groups that perhaps you haven't worked for, but you have interacted with, because you seriously, and as well as being a brash young man, you are a linchpin in this community for many things that go on. So let's talk about, how did you come to Hopkinton?
Well, worked in Washington, D.C., trade association business, and wanted to get back to New England. I'm a New Englander, born and raised in Connecticut, and I am a true New Englander. I've worked in a couple of places other than New England, but I've always yearned to get back here, and came back and worked at what is now the Metro West Chamber of Commerce. And it was there. It's interesting how it links back, and lived in Framingham for a year, and then moved to Hopkinton. Our firstborn was born in Maryland, but the second and third ended up being born in Hopkinton. But it was a stroke of good fortune, because even when I worked for the chamber, I met a guy named Ernie Fecto. Now, Ernie Fecto is, for newcomers of the town, they may not know that name, but he's a real pillar of the community. His family is still ingrained here. His daughter Barbara, for example, works for the Boston Athletic Association. But Ernie was the president of the Framingham Trust Company. He was also involved in the Boston Athletic Association. He was a member. It was guys like Ernie and others. The sidebar story is, if you needed a speaking to, or somebody needed to talk to you about maybe getting a little too excited, these guys would pull you aside and they'd say, and they'd deliver the message, but it was never public. They made their point clear, and most of those guys, Paul Phipps is another one, Tom Brown, all of these, unfortunately, people are no longer with us, but that's how they did business, and that's how they conducted town affairs. And boy, it was a very different environment when people do that, because you had the chance then to think about, okay, maybe they're right, maybe there's something I need to adjust. So my introduction to the community was through people like that, and it was they had pride in the community. They were respectful of people. They were generous. The people I've mentioned were all generous to the community. Ernie was responsible for that first gazebo that was put up pretty much on solely on his efforts. So that's where the introduction came, and I was interested in things like the Boston Athletic Association. It was Ernie who introduced me ultimately to Tom Brown, and it was Tom Brown who said to me back in 1982, "Look, we'd like to make you a member of the BAA, and we were going through a tough time, so we'd like you to join the Board of Governors and help with the marathon." And it was Tom that did that. But prior to that, in 1979, the community set up a Hopkinton Marathon Committee. And the reason they did that, now 79, we had maybe 8,000 people in town, something like that. The marathon wasn't much bigger then, but we had to protect Hopkinton's interests, so to speak. Very few porta-johns, for example. So that committee was set up, and I remember distinctly, Tom Brown was on it, Harold Rathburn. We went to the first meeting, and Tom Brown says, you got to put somebody in charge of this thing. And he points to me, and I really didn't know him very well. He pointed to me, he said, "Let the new guy do it." And that's how I got launched into the marathon business, really. So a lot of respect back then. These are senior, not senior citizens, but I would say more senatorial type in the old sense, that guys had been around and born and raised here and were highly respectful of people in the community. But the community itself is, when we moved into town, there were about 5,000 or 6,000 people.
Yeah.
Very different.
Now, being on the HAA and getting involved in the marathon, was that your first introduction to the world of sport, or had you been a fan all your life?
Well, I had the privilege of running. I was a track and field a runner. I was a hurdler. I ran hurdles in Connecticut, and then finished off at Kent State in Ohio. So I had an interest in the sport, but I understood very quickly. I don't know how. I think it just absorbed in. But I had an appreciation for the power and potential of the marathon. Even back at 1980, there was something about it that drew people. And those were different days. You could walk to the starting line 5 minutes before the start.
Right.
Can't do that anymore. But still, there's something about that world-class event that's attractive. It's intoxicating, essentially. So that's really how. And
yeah,
I had the privilege of working with the BA and Tom Brown and Harold Rathburn when the BA was in a pretty tough straits. the Boston Athletic Association almost lost the race. It was almost sold out from underneath them, and living through that process was quite the learning, quite frankly, because you were talking about extracting the BAA from rather serious and very heavy duty legal contracts. All have had to be unwoven and then put back together. And you see what the BAA is like now. It's a very strong, globally recognized brand.
Right. I'll tell you, I have had such good memories of riding our bikes when my kids were little down to the start of the marathon. It's such an exciting day in Hopkinton.
One of the things I guess I have a request or an idea. Why not try it out now? We have thought, and you two have been part of these discussions. There is something in Hopkinton called we call it Hopkinton's Marathon Footprint. The two of you are very, very well versed in that. But one of the things that we haven't done, we haven't cataloged, first defined or cataloged what that means and what goes into it. And I think in 2021, that's a subject that we clearly need HCAM's help and guidance and support on this, but we ought to get serious about this. The race was moved here in, I think, 1924. There are people that added greatly to the continuation of the marathon. The Browns of Hopkinton, you both are familiar with them. Mm-hmm. Browns of Hopkinton are sports legends. And I would guess, I'd ask you, how many of the new people in town really understand the legacy of the Brown family?
Most people, when they hear Brown, all they think is the gymnasium of the middle school.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Well, George V. Brown and Walter Brown, and that doesn't, years later, Tom became the president of the BAA, but George and Walter are both in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, Canada. When I tell people, they say, what? These are legitimate hockey people. These are Olympic coaches. These are people that at one point had their thumb on the Boston Celtics, the Bruins, and the Boston Garden. Wow. And both are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. There's an example.
Yeah.
And it's the Brown family that kept that marathon going. And when they needed to find a different start, it wasn't. I don't think too many people had much say on where it was going to go. The Browns moved it to Hopkinton.
So let me ask. I'm interested. Clearly, that invitation for the HAA started you on a path that intertwined you with the community of Hopkinton very deeply. And I'm curious, Tim, was that the first really community civic minded thing that you've been involved in, or had you contributed to other communities or other endeavors in the past?
I've always been interested in, let's call it external relations. probably more interested in external relations when I was in college than I was academics. But no, there's always been that interest. I have an education degree with a focus on physical education. So we always had this sort of outward view of this. Mm-hmm. But the marathon is now that I don't think we all appreciate this, but the dynamic, the potential economic value that the marathon can bring to Hopkins, I'm talking about the future, is very substantial.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around that, because, we grow up with it. We see the marathon every year, and it's really nice, and it blows into town, and then it blows out of town. And, to be able to conceptualize that as being more, as being like a permanent location or program or interaction with the community that goes on for the entire year. it takes a person with vision to have that vision to be able to see what could come of this.
Well, I guess the way to put it is, if one has the patience to just listen, all of those ideas present themselves. It's like the universe. This lays it out right in front of you. Who would have thought that we would have an elementary school named Marathon?
Right.
Who would have thought that we would have, hopefully, next spring, sculpture that honors the first woman to ever run the Boston Marathon? So, I mean, it's now beginning to play out itself. The Hopkinton Running Club is a strong running club. This is an area where people are interested in health and well-being. It's part of Hopkinton's vision, if you will, now. And it's one of it, in addition to schools and public safety, sort of this health and well-being side of Hopkinton is probably the third most strongest asset that the community has.
Well, that's a great way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about the community, you also have to talk about how safe things are. I remember, Jim, when you were talking about, we're number one of this, number one of that, but we also the safest town, okay, yeah. Which goes a lot. And, what does that make the community, knowing that it's so safe that, people still want to come here and be a part of it and add to that community. Because back when you came to town, you weren't thinking about how safe it was out here. It was just cute and quaint.
Yeah. And, I find that I think about that kind of thing, Mike, a lot, because as you know, I teach one class up at the high school and I do a middle school TV club. I'm in those buildings and I don't know what it is, but there is a feeling and there is a community that you can really sense. And it's not what you would think the stereotypical, teenager is like. There is a kindness and a compassion that I've seen in both of these schools that simply amazes me. And that same feeling permeates all of Hopkinton.
Right.
It's just,
right.
It's just, there's some, they say, oh, there's something in the water. There is something in the community that there is tremendous volunteer participation. There's tremendous caring for people. I mean, Mike's actually had a lot of this with the pandemic. You're delivering food from
delivering food for what else?
Like just all these things. This community looks out for itself. And I think about it and I wonder what it is. I know, we were blessed with EMC. They pay a lot of money in taxes. We're blessed with people in this community who care about this community, who really support the HCA. So like there's got to be just all these things that came together and wow.
Well, I agree. And to me, we have a platform to push that story out globally.
Right.
It presents itself every third Monday in April, and it does. And I just want to get back because I want to make sure we get your collective buy-ins here. After the first of the year, we're going to assemble a group of people. The 26.2 Foundation is going to assemble a group of people that are going to tackle the issue of collecting and cataloging Hopkins Marathon footprint. And HCAM absolutely needs to be part of that initiative and that effort. We've started to talk to some people already. John Collins, who some of you know, Steve Campbell lives on the Common, Joy Donahue. We're going to reach out to Ann Mattina in the historic committee and others. Dottie Ferreter, the chairman of the Marathon Committee. We need to capture this. We need to get it in one place, or it's going to be lost. I want to tell you one quick story. Mary Pratt, I remember clearly the time, place, and location when she told me the story, but she recalled the day when Walter Brown was in her living room with Joe Pratt and Tom Brown and some of his Hopkinton buddies. And she was in the kitchen, and she recalls them talking about Walter Brown, asking the opinion of his Hopkinton friends what they thought about signing a black basketball player to the Celtics. She remembered that clearly.
Wow.
And I'll remember that the time and place that Mary told me that story. And that basketball player was Bill Russell.
Bill Russell. Yeah, I remember that story.
That's the stuff that, it sends chills up your spine.
Wow.
And there are others. And, you mentioned Chuck Joseph. He's a fount of information because he's taken the time to go back and look at history. I think we have to catalog that stuff, Jim and Mike. And HCAM's got to play a vital role in that. And this is not some small task. One of the things that frightened us, quite frankly, is if you guys put out a notice saying we'd like all your marathon photographs, we couldn't handle it. So we've got to put a system in place. So I think both of you are saying yes. HCAM should be involved in that.
Absolutely. That is why we exist. That's what we live for.
Good.
I have all those great interviews, all those trips into Boston with you, and all that marathon related stuff. And so, yeah, I can't wait to just pull it all out and, like you said, showcase it in one spot.
I don't know what we do with it, but we better get it. We got to collect it. And then you look at again the impacts in this community. You mentioned a couple of business people downtown. This has been tough. We don't want to. Well, yes, we do. Why not? You got a company like Hopio. Yeah. They're working really hard. They're being very creative now, and they want to keep the thing going.
Absolutely.
And
they're still giving. Here they're all working their butts off to get customers, and they're still giving money to the schools with their little pie drives and everything. Everyone's being creative. Everyone's trying to help each other out. And I know it's tough for business, and I'm sure the town is doing everything they can to be easy on these businesses during this tough time.
I think the town's doing a good job. I do. They keep things moving. There's some big projects in Hopkinton on the horizon. Of course, the corridor project.
That's the spring. That's going to kick off this spring. Woohoo!
Yeah.
I'm excited.
It's something to be excited about, but there are going to be challenges in and around that. So I've always thought that Hopkinton was a good community on its way to being a great community. And I'm sure we'd get an argument about that because it might well be great at the moment. And if it's great at the moment, it's going to get greater. It's ideally located, situated. We've got caring people that some of whom you guys have already pointed out.
Yeah. And we're also, with all the great volunteers, the great local leaders, the state leaders that are around us, our representatives and so forth, doing a great job. Tim, our time has flown by and we didn't even get into half of it. So we will be talking again next month, and I'm sure I'm going to pull you back because there's so much more I want to talk about. But I want to thank you for coming on tonight. We love hearing about you. We don't get you on here enough. So.
Well, please, I'm serious. You guys ought to take a moment and pat yourselves on the back. And,
well, we will, but we won't hurt ourselves.
It's all been great, but unfortunately, you got to keep it up, guys.
All right, so we got to go. I want to say goodbye to everyone and have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. And we'll be back live after the New Year.